My name is Anton Shelupanov. I'm the managing director at Mattereum. It's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues already connecting. This is the second in our series of physical asset NFT meetups aimed at bringing together people who are working in the space, people who are interested in the space, people who are building the physical asset NFT ecosystem, and people who are participating or have interest in that ecosystem. Today's theme is the inevitable move towards physical asset NFTs. And we have a few brilliant speakers representing various very interesting projects, initiatives, and areas of expertise. We look forward to hearing from them all. First of all, a little bit of housekeeping. This event is being recorded, and it will be a recording of it. Will be released on social media. So by attending, those who are here, you are agreeing to your image being used if you do find yourself speaking or asking questions and so on. There are loads of ways to interact. Please do post questions in the chat. There will be the opportunity for people who are not on panels to say a few words during the break if you raise your hand virtually, and then there will be an after party. We're going to move to a different Zoom link. There'll be breakout rooms, and there will be the opportunity to have conversations with each other. Andrew has posted a link to a Google Doc into the chat where anybody who wants to be contacted by others in this event can put their contact details, and that's an opportunity for people who are here to connect. If you don't manage to connect during the after party Zoom session, after we hear from a brilliant array of speakers, Ketan is monitoring the chat and the Q&A for questions, and he will do his best to marshal some of those questions and group them into themes to ensure that if there is enough interest in a particular topic or in a particular question, our participants are able to answer it. Vinay Gupta, who is the founder of Mattereum and the CEO of Mattereum, is here. He's going to be having fireside chats with our panelists after they present their work and introduce themselves, and there will be the opportunity to ask maybe one or two questions at the end of each slot, but we probably won't be able to take all questions. So let's try and save some of those for the after party interaction, for the separate Zoom afterwards. Also, excitingly, there will be a POAP, a proof of attendance protocol token. There will be 100 of them on a first come, first serve basis, and there will be instructions for how to receive those at the end of this part of the event. Ian, could I please have the slide for the first speaker? So we are very fortunate to have Maureen Downey with us of Chai Vault and of Winefraud.com, all the way from California. Fraud prevention is a very important part of what we are going to be discussing this evening, and there are many asset classes which are of great interest. I think wine is such an asset class. So, Maureen, perhaps you could introduce yourself and tell us about your work.
So my name is Maureen Downey, and I am a wine expert. I have been authenticating wine for 22 years, and Web3 has really changed the game in terms of being able to combat fraud, both with blockchain and of course NFT. So I manage private wine collections. My company is called Shea Consulting. After the arrest of Rudy Kurniawan, I don't know how many people out there are aware of the scope of wine fraud, but according to the World Health Organization, about 25%, well, 25% of all alcohol is illicit. The numbers that Interpol gives us is that about 20% of all wine is counterfeit, and up to, depending on the market, up to 30% of all spirits are counterfeit. So this is a huge industry. There have been a couple of high-profile cases, including Rudy Kurniawan, who was arrested in 2012. There's a movie called Sour Grapes, and there's lots of TV about him. It's kind of fun. If you're in the UK, actually, if you're anywhere, The Wine Show did an episode on this in the first season. So it's a big problem. It's an interesting problem. It's interesting because people think it's kind of fun that wine collectors are getting defrauded. Of course, I don't think that's funny. I first learned about the blockchain, believe it or not, in 2015. So I bet a lot of people on this call were still in diapers at that point. So I was a very early adopter, and I realized that through blockchain security, we can actually not only prove the authenticity of a bottle of wine, but also the provenance of a bottle of wine. And one of the things that's always been an issue for producers has been an ability to communicate in a more personal way with the consumer. They, a long time ago, people used QR codes, and that didn't really do much because it's really a one-way show in that case. And I didn't realize what I was doing. I completed my software build out in 2019, and we actually put in the software an ability to layer a place for this consumer interaction with the producer or the vendor, whoever was having the bottle authenticated. The company is called Vault. Obviously, it's a digital vault of your wine, and bottles can be authenticated either at the time of production or in the secondary market via one of our authenticators. And we have authenticators now all over the globe. But the really cool thing, I think, for this conversation is that not only does this allow for the bottle to have provable provenance, which can be viewed via an online hyperlink, where there's actually a certificate of authenticity and provenance that shows not only when the bottle was authenticated, being at the time of production by the producer, or in the secondary market by what authenticator, but there's also a spot where we can layer an NFT. So we have enabled now producers to view the movement of their bottles, or individual bottles, through the supply chain, through secondary markets. And then not only do they know who owns their bottle, but through the layering of an NFT, for example, a Club dVIN NFT, somebody from Club dVIN is going to be speaking next, and they're one of the main companies, and I think really a leader in wine NFTs out there. The producer can be present with the consumer at the time of consumption. They can explain the vintage, they can show the vineyards at the time. So you're drinking a bottle 20 years after it was made, but you're being talked to about that bottle at the time of production, which is kind of fun. Mm-hmm. And then the producers can go in and see, once the bottles have been opened, who and where the bottles were consumed, because people have the ability to add a little bit of video onto their NFT when they burn the token. So what I'm really excited about is that this is a full-scale solution to a problem that has really plagued the wine and spirits industry for not decades, but millennium. Pliny the Elder in 41 AD wrote about how stupid his friends were because they were waxing and waning poetic about a particular bottle of Falernium, which was the best wine at the time. And he knew so much about wine that he knew that what they were drinking was actually counterfeit. So this is not a new problem. It's not, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. What we're trying to do is solve a problem that has plagued producers forever. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to enhance my solution with the addition of NFTs. And I just think it's a really exciting time for wines and spirits.
Fantastic. So in terms of the Winefraud, I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience, have heard about Winefraud, but they don't have much of a practical sense of how it gets done. Could you talk to us a little bit about the sort of procedure, the anatomy, the sort of operational detail of how Winefraud occurs? Like,
Sure.
Is it industrial? Is it happening, when things are bottled? It just gives a sense of the sort of shape of this.
So it has changed over the last, I'd say, 15 to 20 years. It used to be a much smaller operation where somebody might just take bottles and refill them. I mean, there have been huge scandals in Europe where gangs have gone around and collected empty bottles from hotels, casinos, and restaurants, refilled them and sold them online. There have also been the one-off people like Hardy Rodenstock, Rudy Krenia one that I mentioned, that they recreate fantastical bottles that sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Now, because Rudy is really the only person that's ever served time for this, what organized crime realized is they looked at this, they said, okay, one guy went down for this for, he spent 7.5 years in jail. He made hundreds of millions of dollars for other people. So organized crime looks at it and says, okay, well, we can buy digital printers because all the producers went from plate press production to digital printing as a result of this fraud, thinking that they could add anti-fraud, being, invisible ink and micro writing and things like that. And unfortunately, a professional grade printer like that is about $500,000. A lot of bottles of wine today are being released at $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 per. So organized crime realized, hey, if we get into this game, if we get caught, nobody really cares. So today what we're seeing is a much more industrialized basis of mass scale production. It does get into the regular supply chains. It sneaks in where somebody will swap out a pallet or several boxes on a pallet, or somebody will make a bunch of wine and make up an email and contact somebody and say, hey, I'm a distributor with XYZ. I have these wines. The buyer fell through. Great price. Are you interested? And people oftentimes think that they're buying a legitimate product, and the product looks legitimate. And it's so legitimate. So for those of you in the UK, I judge at the International Wine Challenge, and we judge at the Kia Oval. So the Vauxhall tube station right there, I went in and bought a bottle of Hendrick's from the very recognizable supermarket chain store across the street from the Vauxhall Market. I went back and put it in my fridge and it froze. So gin's not supposed to freeze, people.
Yeah. No,
so this is not something that happens only to rich billionaires. What we're seeing now is that they're making the high-end wine, but they're also making mid-tier wine. One of the bottlers of Côte d'Rhône, which is the largest producer of wine in the world, the region, was counterfeiting his own wine. So 1/3 of all the Côte d'Rhône wines in 3 vintages was counterfeit. This is a massive, massive problem. And one of the things about the Shea Vault is that it can not only be used for, for wines and for spirits, but really for any luxury product. But, we're looking at things like olive oil. There's a counterfeit olive oil is a massive industry. So there are a lot of applications for this. And I think that as we move forward, the ability to layer, this anti-fraud with some sort of consumer interaction by the producers is going to be more and more important.
Colleagues,
yeah.
I'm conscious of the time and the need to keep moving forward. Vinay, perhaps you could ask Maureen one more question before we move on to the next panelist.
Sure. So in this kind of context, somebody's attempting to carry out a wine fraud. Where is the step where the presence of the blockchain system derails that? Where's the part where they hit the hard limit and, we could have pulled off this fraud, but unfortunately it's on the blockchain. Tell me a wee bit about exactly how that kind of defensive mechanism works and how it derails the frauds.
So the important thing, I think, when it comes to wines and spirits is that somebody needs to know the authenticity prior to purchase. And wines and spirits are not purchased by being next to it, by where you can scan something. So you need this information prior to purchase, but you need it remotely. So the ability to have this URL online where somebody can actually see the ledger of authenticity and provenance, and that is in the blockchain such that it's transferable. So every time the bottle sells, the provenance is updated. Now, obviously the owner's name can be encrypted, but the sale information cannot. The place where it gets, where we derail the fraudster is that instead of somebody saying, oh no, you can trust me, buy this bottle, it comes from a good source, I can now say, I don't trust you, I want proof. I don't want to trust, I want to verify. And I want to verify before I spend my money, not, have a problem after I've spent my money. So for me, the important aspect of this is that it must come in advance of purchase. And that's what the Shea Vault allows people to have, is that knowledge in advance of purchase without having to be in physical proximity to the bottle at the time.
Got it.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and there will be opportunities. Please do put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. There will be opportunities to ask Maureen questions later on in the second session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maureen. But it's lovely to see, like sort of internationally recognized experts in this kind of authentication work, discovering that the blockchain actually solves a real problem for them. There've been any number of prototypes and attempts and people trying to, find use cases for the blockchain, but it's interesting to see, kind of expert-led projects actually solving problems with it. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Ian, could we get the next slide, please? Okay, so we are now moving on to our next panelist, who is still going to be speaking on the subject of wine. And we have Tchebotareva with us from Club dVIN. I believe there is a video, there is a short video first. If you could please play the video.
Welcome to dVIN, a wine and Web3 platform disintermediating the $7 billion investment-grade wine industry. dVIN has two core components. The first is a loyalty platform, which enables wineries to reward and engage their most passionate consumers. It provides them with unique data on when, where, and with whom fine wines are traded and consumed. And uniquely, it enables for two-way communications between the winemaker and their end consumer, a particularly powerful value proposition in European geographies, where you have much less direct-to-consumer sales than you would in the US. There's also Club dVIN, which is for folks who are wine native, crypto curious, and crypto native wine curious, but are united in their passion for collecting and sharing fine wines. dVIN is the first to tokenize not just the ownership of the fine wine bottles, but also the opening and the sharing of the wine itself. dVIN has two key kinds of NFTs: digital cork NFTs and tasting token NFTs. The digital corks you might think of as a digital twin. It's a unique NFT attached to a unique wine bottle. However, when you choose to open that wine bottle, which will be an average of 14 years after it left the chateau for an investment-grade wine bottle, you burn the digital cork NFT and you mint tasting token NFTs, which you can hand out to the friends with whom you had the pleasure of sharing the wine that evening as POEs, proof of experiences. And for the first time in the history of wine, winemakers can see not just who's owning the wine, but consuming the wine, and reward these individuals accordingly.
Thank you very much. And I think now there is the opportunity for Vinay to ask Kat a few questions.
Hey, absolutely fantastic. So talk to me a wee bit about proof of experience. I think that's a new way of thinking about NFTs. So I'm quite interested in how that fits into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having us on, and Maureen, thank you for your presentation. I think very, very complementary sort of solutions that we're building. So with regards to the POEs, I think for folks who are more native to the Web3 space, you might have heard of POAPs as something that's been talked about quite a lot. And so within the world of NFTs, which are obviously unique in and of themselves, they are, as it were, transferable, right? So with regards to the whole provenance, it only holds value because you can then, as that, in our case, wine bottle transfers, the ownership of the physical asset transfers, as does of the NFT. So the POEs for us are non-transferable, so AKA soul-bound tokens. And the reason that that's very relevant for us in the investment grade wine industry is that if you're a wine collector right now, there is an active consumer habit of, if you were experiencing an amazing cult wine that was quite hard to get your hands on, and if, let's say, in my case, I'm the person to bring this to a 10-person dinner, if I share that wine, the habit right now is to take a photo of that wine and you post it to your Instagram so that your friends who are also wine collectors can see that you had that wine that night. And it's, there's a story around that. There's like, oh, wow, like you were able to get this very like once in a lifetime experience in that evening with these people. And so for us, what the POEs, our tasting tokens, do is they put this on chain. And so there's kind of two key utilities there. The first is it's a very fun, almost like, luxury gamified experience. And instead of posting to Instagram, you're collecting a POE. So then you can have inside of our dVIN app, basically a tasting journal of all the things you've tasted. In the future, you'll be able to add UGC, so user generated content, so you can upload your own tasting notes and your own photos. And then the second piece of that is for the winemaker. They're seeing this happen in real time. And so for the first time in over, the over 1,000 years that wine has been produced, so as Maureen mentioned, the stories from Pliny, go back to way before anyone's time here. So now for the first time in history, the winemakers can see not just who's owning the wines, but who's collecting these POEs. And they know that it was exactly this individual who drank the wine, not the person next to them, because once again, these tokens are soul bound and ownership, and once granted and handed out, those tokens cannot be transferred to anyone else.
So what this creates is kind of a continuous sort of data link from the original bottling right the way through to the drinking, the consumption, the whole thing is in a single kind of chain of custody almost.
Yeah, exactly. And what's key for us is if you're thinking about it from a mental model perspective, investment grade wines, they're more like fine art than they are like beer, right? So the mental model is not a beverage, right? It's really like an asset class. And so we're targeting, and what's really interesting for us is that we're working within a space of wine collectors, wine lovers, but it's a way different time horizon than it would be for, let's say, your average kind of bottle of wine that you buy at a supermarket, because for us, investment grade wine bottle, it's an average of 14 years before you would consume that. And then it will flip through something like an auction house, an average of 3.4 times as well. So it's, once again, much more like a collectible wine is actually very niche in the journey that it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if half of it, if the average is 14 years, then a good chunk of it is out there for 25, 30 years. It's an intergenerational process of, one person buys it, another person drinks it.
Yeah, very simply.
Yeah. So the notion of this kind of tokenization of experience, as it fits into the wine sort of business, does this become almost about sort of proving what you've experienced to other people? Is it a sense of like, yeah, I really did go to South America. Here's my picture. Yes, I have really drank Chateau, whatever it happens to be. You could tell that I'm more of a whiskey drinker than a wine drinker. I mean, how does this fit into, I guess what I'm asking is the cultural question. Like, how does this work for wine people? How does it slot into the culture? Because, I'm quite interested with the sort of, I mean, obviously I was in crypto long before NFTs existed. And prior to NFTs, crypto was dominated first by nerds and then by bankers. And then the NFT arrived and suddenly the creative people arrived and there was art and there were parties that was fun and there was a whole new thing that kind of arrived. Similarly, the wine world, I mean, what are we talking about? 8,000 years of wine trading documented, something like that. It's a massive cultural edifice that goes back further than most religions, understandably. And, now you have this kind of digital aspect to it. How does this all fit together?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very fine balance, right? Because I think we're looking for just the right amount of sort of bleeding edge technology, but then finding the right touch points with what, to your point, and perhaps 8,000 years of traditions. And we think that we found the right solution, which is, for us, the goal of the POEs is when you're opening that, that amazing wine bottle, right, that you've brought to this dinner party or this event, you basically hand out the tasting tokens. So myself as the owner of the wine bottle, I'll then mint these tasting tokens, and then you put your phone away and you enjoy the experience.
I
Maybe
see.
because
So
I
they're,
think,
you know, it's something, it's part of the social ritual. Like the wine is opened, the tokens appear, you drink the wine, you know, your tasting notes or whatever it is are going to get kind of bound to it. The whole thing is kind of integrated story.
yeah, I would imagine, like, and this is not unique to wine, you know, like if you're out with a friend and you stumble upon, you know, you're on a beautiful beach and there's a beautiful sunset, you might take 1 or 2 photos just to document the experience, but then you probably want to put your phone away and actually enjoy the experience. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to have just the right amount of touch points such that you have some collectible of the experience. And that's also what would make it quite easy for you. That's why if you look inside of the metadata of a POE, it's amazing because you have all of these wine notes, all like sort of all of these data attributes, which for you, you can later kind of come back to, but you're not the one who needs to collect those notes and worry about, you know, writing things down. You can just actually like enjoy and, you know, and savor, like literally and figuratively, the experience that we're having.
Okay, sorry, this is a little detail that I'd missed. So the sort of notion is that all of your record keeping as a wine lover goes from this kind of, you know, logbook maintenance type thing. It's like an automated logbook entry that comes with the pictures, the images, and the time and the place, and the pictures of the people that you were drinking it with, because the social elements get added and all the rest of it. And it's kind of like the data part of the logbook just appears, and then the social part you create yourself.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
And that data comes directly from the winemaker. And inside of every POE, you also have a beautiful creative, which also comes to the winemaker. So right now, if you think about the marketing experience, especially in European geographies, all that they have, you know, that the way that a winemaker can storytell is a tiny, you know, 2 square inch label on top of a wine bottle. And now you have inside of every POE, at this point, it's about an 8 to 10 second video that shows you the winemaker story, the vineyards, the people who actually like, you know, like did the harvest, like, and were the ones who delivered that experience to you inside that wine bottle. And so you have that creative inside of the POE. And what's super cool is, let's say I collect it today, you know, Wednesday, December 21st, as the winemaker, a year later, I can actually update that creative and have a new kind of such a communication channel with the end consumer who might have collected this 1 year past.
That's wonderful.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Great system. Really, really impressive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kat, and thank you, Vinay, for leading those questions. There will be opportunities to ask Kat questions a little bit later in the second part of this event when we have the informal conversations, but also please do put your questions in the Q&A and in the chat, and Ketan will hopefully be able to pick some of them out for us later on. Okay, Ian, next slide, please. And now we're very glad to have with us Hannah Ford from Tokenized Properties, which are a subsidiary of West London City Lets, who are conducting a pioneering and unique real estate NFT transaction. And there is a video, and then Hannah will be able to say a few words after that.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Ford. I'm from Mint Collective, an NFT agency, and we have been working with West London City Lets to develop and launch tokenized properties. And the main reason for launching tokenized properties was to facilitate their sale of physical property, physical land in Hampshire as an NFT. So West London City Lets partnered with a team of investors, myself from Mint Collective and Mattereum, who are obviously hosting this wonderful panel event. And together, all of us have launched and developed tokenized properties. So at the moment, we see that there are a lot of problems with traditional property sales, and hence why tokenized properties has been launched. The time that goes into the actual setting up the property sale, setting up the land sale is incredibly lengthy, as most of you will already know. The bureaucracy behind it, a lot of the times it takes weeks and months for solicitors to go through the title deeds, the contracts, and pull all this information together. And it's a really long, lengthy process, and there's often chains involved. The chain collapses, the wholesale collapses. So there's lots of problems, and we feel like there's lots of innovation needed in the real estate sector. Hence why tokenized properties was born and this land sale. So we know that with tokenization of the warranties, the legal rights, and having them stored on the smart contracts, able to buy as an NFT is going to smooth the whole process. So it'll allow for getting rid of solicitors having to go through things, the time it takes. It'll reduce the costs down massively. It'll show you history of ownership. So there's lots and lots of benefits to doing it like this. And we know that there's a lot of teething problems because it's the first time that these transactions have happened. And we've been working through those processes to make this possible. So there's already a few other companies that have done this successfully. So Property in the US and Realty, who've been working on these types of transactions with tokenization. So at the moment, this is how it looks with the integration. So we've got the land sale, and we've got the plot of land in Hampshire. We have the Mattereum asset passport, we've got the smart contract, and then we've got the NFT sat in the middle. So those things working in play with each other allow for this whole thing to work. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this on the main talk. So this is actually how it works, and I'll go into this properly in detail. So yeah, I look forward to speaking to you all properly. Hello.
Ah, splendid.
How's it going?
Well, very well indeed. So we're probably within a very short period of time of the NFT being minted and going live.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about the kind of experience of doing this. You know,
Yeah,
brand
sure.
new territory, never been done before. How has it actually been to actually get this thing done?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. So obviously you guys at Mattereum know, we started this process a couple of months ago with West London City Lets. And it was really brave of them to step into the NFT space and the Web3 space, because ultimately they are the first people to do this in the UK. So when we all got together, myself from Mint, you guys at Mattereum, West London City Lets, it was right, how are we going to facilitate this land sale? How can we make it possible? Obviously, there's so much, so many synchronicities and so many little things to get right to make all this work. So that has been a long process, but yeah, I'm super happy that we're going to mint next week. But yeah, we decided to launch tokenized properties because we realized that actually this might be the first sale, but this is probably going to happen again and again. And if we get this one right, then there's massive opportunity for the real estate sector for lots of people to get on board. And we've seen the benefits, and we know what the benefits are going to be. And having, you know, the Mattereum asset passport linked with the actual physical asset, in this case, the land, is hugely beneficial. It's the thing is quite complex, and I can carry on going through a few little things if you like, to give you a bit of context as to how it might actually work.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I know this from the Mattereum side where we've kind of been constructing this thing, but you know, it's quite interesting to see, you know, as a customer coming across, like, how does it look for you? What's your experience of building it? And what do you perceive the benefits to be? Because, you know, we're very much a kind of, you know, bunch of sort of theoreticians, right? We figure out what's possible. We then kind of actualize it for customers, but the customer has to figure out, like, okay, this theoretical capability, we want that, we need that, we're going to do this thing. Yeah,
exactly. Well, in the past and with traditional land sales, with real estate, as most people know that have bought property, there is so much bureaucracy behind it. And it's usually a really long and lengthy and painful, can be very painful process that can sometimes collapse because of X, Y, and Z. And with this new technology and with NFTs and smart contracts, the beauty of it is that we can store all this information on the blockchain. It doesn't have to have someone going through loads of bits of paper trying to work everything out. The information is going to be there publicly for everyone to see. So the ownership's there, the warranties are there, the legal guarantees are there. So it's going to hopefully make these processes much smoother and way easier for the customer. I guess because this is the first time, there's lots of things that we've spent a lot of time working it out, trying to get it right. And you guys at Mattereum have been amazing doing that. And I'm so glad West London City Lets has had you guys on board as well, to have that stamp of authority and that trust, because that's such a massive thing as well.
It certainly is. I mean, for everybody in the blockchain space, real estate is kind of the holy grail.
Mm.
And that's partly because, of course, the market is so enormous, $350-ish trillion of real estate in the world. But it's also because the real estate purchase process is uniquely broken.
Mm.
It's a nightmarishly difficult and risky process. The transaction failure rate is multiple percent. I mean, it's really, really kind of a drag. So the notion that you could not ignore that complexity, but do that complexity ahead of time, rather than being in a position where you attempt to do the transaction and then everything comes out of the cupboards. You kind of go through the labor first of cleaning everything up and making sure the paperwork is correct and do all these things. It's like moving the burden of the difficulty of the real estate process from the buyers onto the sellers, onto professionals that will take care of that for the buyer. And then when the buyer comes along, what they get is this very slick experience of you buy the NFT and you're done. It's your property now.
Yeah, it should hopefully make it quite a lot easier. Like the one with ours it goes on sale next Monday, and it'll be available to buy on an NFT marketplace that I'm not going to say just yet. But yeah, it will be available to buy. And the idea is that when you purchase the NFT, you pay for 99.9% of it. And then that gives you the option to pay an extra £1 and lock in and actually have the legal rights in your name, for the title deeds in your name. So you can trade the NFT for up to 5 years, as long as the person that's buying it also goes through the KYC and AML process. Mm-hmm. So we still have to be compliant with HMRC and the solicitors. So that's been really, really important, to make sure that whoever owns it, we know where the money's coming from, we know it's legitimate, and we've got that trust there. So yeah, it's super interesting because you've got two things at play. One is the NFT in itself that has value just because it's the first land sale. And the second one is the asset of having the land, which is only going to increase in value. And this is, it's a beautiful plot. It's in Hampshire. It's 2,860 square meters. It's overlooking the Isle of Wight, and it's a really great opportunity for a property developer, but also someone that wants to invest in crypto. So there's two things happening, which has been quite nice to put them together and look at how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is quite it's sort of a paradigm setting thing. The approach that we've taken to the legal and the regulatory aspects of this is, characteristically extremely conservative. It's pretty legally intensive. It's quite a boring approach. We, very, very, very diligent. This is the old joke about Mattereum is like just, middle-aged people do NFTs. But it does give you this thing of like, we have full faith in the idea that when you purchase the NFT, you really do have the property. You are the ultimate beneficial owner. Any lawyer or judge would look at that situation and say, okay, this is where we are. And I think that faith and guarantee is absolutely what the blockchain space has to provide people to get the transition across, so that 10 years from now, 20% of the real estate in the world is traded digitally on these kind of exchanges, rather than the ancient paperwork systems that, we did a bit of work with the Dutch government back in the day on real estate. Mm-hmm. And, their real estate database has scans of 800-year-old parchments in Old Dutch.
Wow.
That are the deeds for ancient patches, right? Old patches of land that haven't been modernized around. And all of that stuff is still legally binding.
Yeah.
So, the beginning of the modernization of these transactional frameworks, it's a huge job, but it's also the world's largest asset class. And, I think we've made a really positive, decisive step forward on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been extremely brave of West London City Lets and yourselves at Mattereum for bringing this project together. And I think it's incredible. And I think whoever buys it, buying the first one ever in 10, 15 years when most real estate is tokenized, it's going to be a real asset to have.
I'm conscious of the time, and we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A which Ketan has picked out. So perhaps I could ask one of them, and then we can move on to the next part of the program. And the question is, what exactly is tokenized? The SPV or the real property? How is this solved legally?
Oh, go on, Vinny.
Okay, so what is being transferred is an option. So if you're the possessor of the NFT, you have an option, which is you can basically take possession of the property for £1. So at the point where you want to take ownership of the property, you pay the £1, and then a conveyancing process occurs and the property is moved out of the special purpose vehicle that currently contains it. The land registry entry is updated, and then at that point you are the kind of identified legal owner of the property. That mechanism is very conservatively designed. It lets you transfer the NFT multiple times without having to go and update the land registry, but it gives you a clear set of legal obligations at every step in the process. There's no sense in which you're winging it at any point. And the legal contracts, fully reflect the liability of you have bought the property and everybody's expected to comply with your requests when you start attempting, for example, legal ownership. What we have explicitly not done is securitized it. So once you have that NFT, there is another set of legal processes called securitization, where you could then divide it up into shares and then sell the shares of it. The legal burdens associated with that are pretty substantial. But we have some very clever friends who are working on that part of the machinery, and there will be a partnership in future to provide what we think is probably the best legal approach for that kind of securitization. It's going to be a while. It's not an easy thing to do, but once it is done, the floodgates will be open.
Thank you very much. I think we must conclude this part of the session now, because we are overriding very slightly by a couple of minutes. There will now be a 5-minute break, during which folks can go and get a drink and take a break from the screen. However, if anybody in the audience would like to say something, please raise your hand, and we can bring you to the floor, and you can share your thoughts about what you've heard so far. But otherwise, we'll be back here in 5 minutes if you want to go and take a short break from the screen. And next up, we have Leonard Kish from the Cortex network, and I believe Leonard does have a video. Ian, if we could get that video up first, please.
Cortex makes it simple to publish to a web that has crypto built into its core. Web addresses and crypto addresses become one and the same. Everything you create online using Cortex is verifiably yours and becomes an address you own that can hold assets and link them. It is a wallet. Everything in it is yours. That means every page can be a crowdfund or a place to send tokens, including NFTs. You could create a gallery where NFTs can have a home, with a page to discuss them and tell their story. Cortex is also a wiki, so it's endlessly flexible, allowing you to create flows and structures that suit your needs, from managing projects, a blog, galleries, and more. Plus, creating a new page and posting it costs you almost nothing, while each domain you claim is yours, and also a tradable asset. And with private channels, you decide who has access to your content and with whom you exchange information. Now you truly own your relationships, your content, and your coin, not some third party. We're inviting everyone to come and easily build a new decentralized web and build your metaverse digital kingdom. Cortex is our token, which will power the Cortex app. The Cortex token will be used for acquiring domains, storage, sending likes and tips through the platform, exclusive NFTs offers, low-cost minting, exclusive access to online events, as well as premium features. Learn more and sign up for updates at crtx.app.
All right, that was a very slick video.
Thanks.
Now, tell me what it actually
Marketing.
Because you have some very, very clever things there, but I don't think they come across. I get the high level story of what.
Yeah, so I think.
But, tell me about the magic.
The way I introduce this is that we talk about Web3, but The web, in essence, is a content distribution protocol, right? It's a HTTP. There really is no content distribution protocol right now for Web3. We've kind of built this layer on top, and we have MetaMask that can interact with the blockchain, but there is no kind of way that blockchain and crypto addresses are built into the core of the web. So what Cortex does is a couple of big kind of crypto advances that we're implementing right now in beta are a way for you to publish, and we'll have a page up for anybody, like your grandma could publish a web page that is to her NFT domain, and creates a namespace, meaning that much like the web today, you'll have say you have Vinay.hmn.human, and you have a birthday party, so you have Vinay.hmn / birthday party. That becomes a page that you can post anything to, publish to, very much like the web today. It's human readable, but then each page also has a crypto address associated with it. So it becomes a way to kind of build relationships and tokenization into content at a very, very deep level and be able to scale it.
So this is all your diabolically clever stuff about derivative key generation and all the rest of that, right? There's some actual, deep cryptographic magic to enable this kind of distributed permissioned thing where I can give you a cryptographic key that lets you.
There is, and at the end of the day, what that enables though is kind of an open network to enable a lot of the use cases we've talked about today already, like the proof of experience. So essentially, if I, you have this Vinay.hmn domain, you can mint subdomains because they're full NFTs that become, part of, some event or some place that you've been that you could share with people that that you were there with. But then they can also start publishing to those subdomains. So it becomes kind of like, very endless ways that just about anybody can start using this kind of a platform, because, now there's an information space that you can publish to and send tokens to and distribute tokens from.
So kind of different from IPFS in that you've got a different kind of permissioning and you can actually do things like attach tokens to documents, but kind of like IPFS in that it's not smart contracts, it's actually like media content, something like that.
Yeah, so it can really be any kind of you can really publish any kind of content that you could publish to a GitHub repository. So, eventually it'll be videos and MP4s, just about anything that you'd want to, as well as complete websites. And so it is IPFS on the back end, but what we're doing is building a namespace around that so that, it looks a lot like the web does today.
I see. So
but because
the equivalent, IPFS kind of becomes like the equivalent of S3. It's the deep underground backend storage that powers the Cortex web.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I see.
And so, so everything that you publish has a crypto address. So it is a wallet address. And it's also a place that other people, because everybody now has an identity, anybody can comment on that page and create pages about it. So essentially, the namespace is built around three things: your key, a topic, and the topic could be just about anything, including your website or your company or anything. And then a privacy channel so that you can decide what's public and what's private within that namespace.
And then this kind of generates the derivative keys. So this stuff isn't like a permissioning layer on a website. This is actually hardcore cryptographic management of reading and writing capability.
Exactly. And as we've talked about, we've even have
cryptographic content management system for the distributed web. Like, oh, we could use one of those.
Yeah, and in fact, we've built in BLS signatures on the back, which what that means is now you can have group features. So one of the use cases we've talked about with Mattereum is, you want to publish a site that has, 7 out of 10 signers have approved this message, essentially. And so we'll be able to enable those kinds of things pretty quickly.
Gotcha. I mean,
So-
this is really an amazing capability because, for a long time, Web3 has been waiting for the kind of killer app, the breakthrough, the social media thing, the blog thing, the music thing, the thing that has
Yeah.
a bajillion users. And frankly, it's just too goddamn hard to use, Mattereum does a lot of publication of complex data, web pages, legal contracts, images for evidence, high-res scans of documents, proofs that things have been signed, all of this kind of stuff. And, the systems that we're using for publishing that stuff are grindy and mandrolic because at the end of the day, it's all going to go into IPFS, and IPFS has a pretty limited set of fundamental primitives.
Yep.
And the alternative is you then try and manage a lot of the permissions inside of your smart contracts, but then you have to write a permissioning system into every single smart contract with all the associated possibilities of screwing the thing up and so on.
Right.
It's quite an attractive thing for Mattereum to say, okay, so there's going to be a real publication layer and we can then just do stuff with it. It's actually quite exciting for us.
With all the benefits of Web3, I always say Web3 is not, I don't know if it will have social applications as much as it'll have social networks and value exchange networks built in at the ground layer is what we're working on. So literally, because you have an identity, you can publish anything you want about another page, and that becomes part of the immutable history as well. So it works really well for, again, a lot of the use cases we've talked about today, like you want to model a physical space because you have a namespace that makes sense now that you can publish this information to, and everything in it has a key that can hold tokens. There's a lot you can do with modeling the real world on a framework like this.
Leonard, thank you very much. I'm afraid we're at the end of this time slot, but and I can see a question for Leonard in the Q&A. Perhaps we can pick that up when we move across to the after party, and there will be opportunities to interact with Leonard and ask him questions a little bit later. Thank you very much. Ian, could we get the next slide up, please? All right, next up, we're very happy to have with us Andrew Harrison, from 4K. They are working with physical asset NFTs, and Andrew is going to say a few words about his work before Vinay asks him a few questions. Andrew, over to you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me. Vinay, it is a pleasure to meet you. I've been following your work for a while and am a big fan. So I hope you had fun at Burning Man this year. I usually go, but unfortunately was forced to miss it due to some unforeseen circumstances this year. But yeah, glad that you set up and got everybody together. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of an overview on 4K protocol and what it is we're doing and what we hope to accomplish in this space. So 4K protocol is essentially a decentralized solution for tokenizing physical assets. We allow anyone, anywhere to mint anything as a physically backed NFT, which can then act as a brand new primitive for Web3. So you can really think of 4K as offering physically backed NFTs as a service. So we work with brands, creators, collectors, and existing marketplaces to tokenize collections and bring physical assets onto the blockchain. So you guys are probably all pretty familiar with the challenges of bridging the physical to the digital world. Historically, creating a digital twin of a physical object has been a very, very difficult problem to solve. The core issue is really around ensuring that there's always a one-to-one relationship between the NFT and the physical asset that it represents. So for example, somebody has an NFT that represents a physical painting, for example, but then sells the painting without transferring the NFT, there can then be two owners of the same asset, the owner of the NFT and then this new owner of the painting. And then the opposite of that can also be true, right? So the holder of the NFT might sell the NFT, but never necessarily transfer the painting. So there's not this inherent accountability to transfer the physical item along with the digital one. So 4K protocol solved this. We figured out all of the accountability issues related to the incentive structure, and that is related to maintaining both the digital copy a physical asset as well as the physical asset together as one unit. So our solution is to coordinate a decentralized network of what we call storage guardians. And a storage guardian is an entity or a specialized asset class storage facility that can intake, store, and protect physical assets that are sent in by users of 4K protocol. So the process is pretty simple. If you want to mint an asset, you create a minting request on our website, you send your items in, and a guardian will mint the items as NFTs once they receive them. So once the items are minted, the NFT is sent to the user's wallet to do whatever they want with it. They can trade it, they can leverage it in DeFi applications, or they can redeem the NFT for the physical asset at any time. Guardians are incentivized to be good actors throughout all of this and properly watch over assets via very in-depth token staking mechanisms that affect their ultimate payouts for protecting these assets, as well as regular audits to ensure that these items are protected and safe. We also offer on-chain loss and damage protection. It's all on-chain, and users are able to view things like guardian prices, facility details, and loss damage rates for each of the guardians before selecting which ones to use to store their items, which essentially creates this bidding system for the quality of protection and inherently leads to a decentralized network of storage facilities that 4K operates with to keep this a very crypto native and decentralized solution. So another cool thing is that anybody can really be a guardian as long as you have a dedicated storage facility. So if you are an existing marketplace for collectible items, or even if you are a vineyard that has a collection of wine that you are holding, you can actually apply to be a 4K guardian and manage whatever that specialized asset class is and be compensated for the work that you're doing through the minting and protection process. So this opens up a lot of new use cases. We're doing some really interesting things with decentralized finance and tokenized merchandise. So we recently partnered with Arcade.xyz, which is a lending protocol, to take a loan out against a Rolex NFT. So we had a tokenized Rolex, and we took it to their lending protocol, and we were able to collateralize it and get a loan against it. So you can imagine if you have a set of collectibles that is sitting around, maybe in your closet, just collecting dust, instead of just leaving it to be a latent asset, you can actually unlock liquidity from it using decentralized finance and 4K protocols. So that's one really interesting use case.
Andrew, I'm conscious of time, and perhaps you may want to leave a couple of minutes for Vinay to be able to ask you some questions, but please conclude your second use case.
Yes, of course. So second use case, tokenized merchandise. We also recently partnered with, did a project with G-Money, who is a very prominent NFT influencer in the space. And he has a fashion line that he is introducing, and he leaned on 4K to help tokenize these luxury t-shirts, which are going to be leveraged in one of our Guardian vaults. And then anybody who buys one of these NFTs can then redeem that asset for the physical shirt at any time. So 4K really just wants to be the foundation for a lot of these projects. We hope to be a foundational piece of this Web3 ecosystem. And if all goes according to plan, we'll be able to power the infrastructure for a lot of these projects that you guys are bringing up, and handle all of the heavy lifting so that you can focus on building the things that matter.
Fantastic. So tell me a wee bit about how you see an NFT. Different people use NFTs to mean different things. Like an NFT might be an intellectual property license, or it might be, kind of warehouse receipt, something like that. Give me a sense of what a 4K NFT is. When I buy it, what rights do I get? What capabilities do I inherit? Give me a sense of how that works.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a warehouse receipt is probably its number one functionality in terms of, if you have this NFT, you can trade it in for the physical item at any time. But there's also a lot of utility that is inherently baked into these 4K NFTs. So the fact that you can take it and then, understand provenance and see price history as these things are being traded on the secondary market is really interesting and opens up a lot of new use cases for decentralized finance that we probably haven't even thought of yet. So the fact that this is a composable Web3 primitive is going to unlock a lot of doors, and we hope to partner with a lot of developers down the road to really make the most of this and see what they come up with.
And in this kind of context, I feel like there's a bit of a language gap. Everybody that's using physical NFTs, like even the industry hasn't really settled on a term. Physical NFTs, digitals, there's some talk about digital twins. You know what I'm saying, right? This terminology gap.
Yeah.
Do you ever come across
sure.
a book by a guy called Bruce Sterling called Shaping Things? It's about 15 years old.
I'm not familiar with that now.
So Bruce has this term spine, right? And for him, a spine is a physical object with a digital twin, where every iteration of the physical object, like the Gen 3, the Gen 4, the Gen 5, basically pull in all the information about how the things have been used in the real world, and then that goes back into the design process for the next version of it. I kind of feel like this thing of the terminology gap and the understanding of like, how is this stuff really going to tie together in future? So one of the biggest hurdles I think we face as an industry is getting it across to people like, yes, it's a warehouse receipt, but it's a warehouse receipt, tied to a digital twin, tied to an insurance policy, tied to a physical vault, tied to a repair policy, tied to a maintenance log. What do you think is going to have to happen before we can get over that language barrier and people will just know what it is that we're all doing here? How do we get over that bridge?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. And I think, as the industry takes shape, I think the solution will start to emerge. I don't think any one party is going to be able to come out with what, the final lay of the land is going to look like in terms of how people view these types of NFTs and this whole phygital movement. I will go on record as saying I am not a fan of the word phygital, and I've had a lot of conversations.
I almost feel like we need
at
a
the
pact
company
for all the folks in
really
the space just refuse to use the word phygital, because if we use it at all, it's going to stick. Like, no fidgetal.
Yeah, I think many of us
to
are a bit bemused by that term.
Yeah, the Fidgetal Allergy Society.
Yeah, so I like this idea of the spine. I'll have to look into that. I think, just having more and more conversations and letting people understand the use cases and what they can come to expect from the utility of these things is really, the next step. And once they realize that this is better than the status quo, then hopefully people will start to understand the value and move over.
The G-Money project is super cool. Congratulations, Matt. We had some conversations with G-Money for a while. That phrase of his, like, everything in the world which isn't currency is an NFT, was one of our real kind of what do you call those things? Not lampposts, lighthouses. It was just this thing of like, that's what we mean.
We're very excited about it. So thank you for your support there. And great to meet you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I can see that there is a question for Andrew in the Q&A, but we must move on with the program. And Alex, you will be able to ask Andrew that question during the after party, during the breakout session. So please do keep that question fresh, and you will be able to ask it. Thank you very much, Andrew. Ian, could we have the next slide, please? All right. So now our concluding speaker in this part of the program is Dr. John Ennis from Neoswap. Marketplaces, of course, are a hugely important part of the ecosystem, and we are looking forward to hearing a little bit about the work that John is doing in that area. Could we play the video, please?
Welcome to Neoswap. I'll join a live party now and do a speed run to show you the steps. So you can see there are 3 people in here already. We have a chat function down the side, as we have found these parties to be very social and a lot of fun things happen here. I can see these 3 people have already listed their NFTs, so I will select some of mine now from my wallet and list them. We're an all-sided marketplace, making multi-way, multi-item NFT swaps possible for the first time ever. I'll be listing these below the floor price, as they aren't very liquid at the floor price anyway. Once that is done, I will click save and will proceed to the bidding stage. Now we're at the bidding stage. The first thing I'll do is set a budget. This is like a supplementary account which acts as a top up to help get more trades. The important thing to remember here is I cannot overspend, so I can select as many NFTs as I'd like here. I can see all the NFTs everyone has listed here, and I'll select the ones that I like. While I'm doing this, we do have a live bidding function, which adds a bit of fun and competitiveness to the parties. Green means I have the highest bid, orange means I'm tied, and red means I'm losing. This doesn't necessarily mean that I will win the NFT, but the bids do inform our algorithm. Finally, I'll click save, and if everyone else is done, our solver will run and propose a trade. Shouldn't take more than a few seconds. There we go. So I gave up nearly 17 stacks, those 4 NFTs, and I got 4 NFTs I wanted. Good trade. And now we have a GIF, which shows the trade overall from everyone's perspective. The next thing is a smart contract will be deployed and all parties will sign and the trade will be executed. You can see that this isn't peer-to-peer swapping. Different people are giving up different things, and that unlocks trades you wouldn't be able to find otherwise. So that's a quick demo of Neoswap. We run parties, which are essentially a pop-up market, allowing up to 20 people at a time to come and swap with each other. We're live on Stacks blockchain, and we have been for the past 4 months, and we're building on Solana as we speak. If you're interested in learning more, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us at neoswap_AI on Twitter.
All righty.
All right.
So this will be fun.
Yeah, and I should cover, that's not my voice. That's Kieran Parker Baroni, who I think is in attendance. So he did a great job with that video. Just want to give him credit.
Yeah,
Okay.
I finally caught up with Kieran about this blog post. So yeah, that is in progress. Should we do the gentle warm up, or should we get straight to the Bond villainy?
Well, you're in charge, so go ahead.
Okay, let's get straight to Bond villainy. It's been a very good session so far. Let's have a little fun. So what you are proposing is the invention of a kind of fundamentally new economic primitive on the same general order as, say, the invention of the auction, right?
Yeah, or even the invention of money. I mean, it'd be like
invention of money, right? Invention of money, invention of auctions. It's a sort of fundamental, high complexity economic mechanism that is only really implementable when you've got, secure transfer of value on digital networks with a bunch of computational horsepower to do the trade matching.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So this is super deep into sci-fi territory, right? I mean, it's like going all the way down through the sack of civilization, getting right down to the base layer and saying, right, we're going to change the way that people buy and sell stuff in a way that fundamentally shifts things like how price discovery happens, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Or even settlement prices, where you just have a general notion of utility that's inside people. Yeah. Absolutely.
So first question, how the hell did you get there?
Okay.
This is not a regular thing that people just kind of stumble across. One afternoon I was reading a book and I had an idea. Like, what was your trajectory to get to, hacking on civilization at this ultra deep layer?
Right. Okay. Well, a few things. I mean, one, I have to give credit to my father, who is a strange person, but a very helpful person in a lot of ways. When I was a child, when I was 12 at Christmas, my father wanted to know if he gave out all the Christmas presents at random. So they would go shopping for all the Christmas presents for the kids. I had 3 brothers and sisters, give them out at random. And my dad wanted to know if everybody traded one-on-one, would the presents go where they were supposed to go? And the answer actually, sadly, is no, they don't. And so you end up with unhappy kids. But it got me really interested in the problem. If you have a group of people and you bring them together, what are the best multi-way trades in the group? And it turns out when you introduce a little bit of currency, not a lot, but enough, because what happens is you don't necessarily have equal matches of utility. You start moving things around. And even if a trade is maybe good for me, it might be better for you, Vinay. But if we can introduce a little bit of money, we can make it so the trades are equally good for everybody. Okay, so that's kind of unlocks new value. So I started working on that, even as a child. There was one Christmas where I proposed a 3-way trade with my brother and sister. And I got kind of interested in it, but I didn't have the skills to solve it. So then as I grew up, I got my PhD in math. I did my postdoc in computational neuroscience, and I was always kind of working on this. And in 2017, I came up with the first efficient algorithm that I've written for solving this. It turns out other people have worked on similar problems. And I started to try to use it in the real world. It just turns out it's way too complicated. I mean, if I can show here on my background, here's a 20-person trade. This is a real trade that happened in one of our rooms. So this is a 20-person trade, simultaneous trade that's good for 20 people all at the same time. Okay, and this happened, and everybody signed the contract, and this is This might be the first simultaneous 20-person trade in human history that actually happened, where everybody, the ownership got reassigned. The thing is, if you're trying to do that in real life, it's the wrong place to start. Maybe eventually I actually like the word phygital, so I'm going to hang on to it for now until somebody gives me a better word. But
heretics.
But maybe eventually we can get there, and that is the hope. That is kind of the dream with the Internet of Things and sensors and drone delivery and all the other technology that's coming. I think we can actually get there. But
and we ought to be able to get you there. I'm like, this time next year we ought to be doing this for like probably real estate.
Yes,
definitely. I think you're underestimating how fast this can run. But anyway, go on.
If the items are in your vault, for sure. If you've got to do all these handoffs, then it gets.
us 4K, like anybody that's got their stuff up to a secure level of management, you could take 4K NFTs, Mattereum NFTs, anybody whose stuff hits your threshold for certitude of delivery.
That's right.
It isn't a sort of one vendor solution. It's like everybody that has phygital stuff can pilot into these machines.
Yes, and that's actually where the work you've done on the legal side that your team has done is so important, because there has been this missing link between blockchain ownership and legally recognized ownership. And that's why I think I'm a big fan of a lot of your work. And that's one thing I think has been really important, underestimated how important that is actually, I think. So anyway, with this like new form of commerce, so we thought about doing it in the physical world. We thought about doing it in Web 2, but it's very hard to innovate inside somebody else's ecosystem. Plus you have to have right control over the database. There's a lot of reasons why Web 2 is a hard place to start with this too. But in Web 3, everybody owns their NFTs. They can come together and you can find these trades that are good for everyone. Okay. And then the best thing is you get all this data on people. So that means you can use it to start to predict trades involving items that people haven't seen before. And we have people that have been to hundreds of our events. We call them parties. We're learning a lot about them. And now we're proposing trades outside of the parties. I think last week we had 14 AI proposed trades. So we see a future where it's really fully liquid. All these assets that have historically been illiquid will become liquid, and they'll start to move around. And like the big vision is that you've got sensors on physical items in your house. And after a while, there'll be a sensor that's indicating this book hasn't been open in 6 months. Maybe it should nominate it for a trade. And then you'll start to propose trades, maybe together with your browsing history or whatever, that you've been looking for one thing online. You haven't used a piano in 6 months. Maybe you'd rather have a jet ski. And so stuff can start to move around. Yeah. And it'll be way more sustainable. And I think, Vinay, this is one of the reasons why I think you and I have been on the same page. There's a huge amount of waste. I think there's a lot of talk about carbon dioxide, but that's not the only problem we have. Like the oceans there's all sorts of plastic in the oceans from there's all sorts of issues that
deforestation. Fast fashion alone is something like 5% global environmental footprint.
Oh, is that right?
It's insane because it's all made of polyester, and they speculatively manufacture a bunch of stuff they can't sell, and then it goes straight into landfill. It's bunker.
Yeah, and high fashion is like 70 to 80% waste that goes to landfills. It's amazing how.
Say again, I missed the word.
High fashion depends on the
fashion. Oh god,
but I've heard it's between 70 and actually 85% goes to landfills.
Wow.
So it's another statistic: half of items that are donated to thrift stores are never used again. They either get thrown away or they get recycled, which is really inefficient.
So we've been kicking around this term that we haven't started to use much in public so far, of spiral economy. In circular economy, the notion is you basically rip the thing down to raw materials, melt the raw materials down, and then make a new one. So every time you put something around the circuit, you destroy it. Spiral economy, you make the stuff and it just keeps going around and around and around for different users. And then when somebody makes a newer, more amazing version, the people that can afford it buy the new version, and the old version goes out to the next ring of people. So it moves from, say, being recirculated in America to being recirculated in Mexico. It goes from being recirculated in Mexico to being recirculated in Honduras. And the goods just get pushed further and further and further out, towards the villages where people are really poor and really need stuff. And, your 15-year-old digital camera winds up in the hands of some school kid in, like the, outside edge of Honduras or Brazil or India. And those kind of models, it's not you're necessarily going to price all of that stuff and financialize all of that trade.
Right.
You can imagine that when you get down to the village level, your cash is extremely scarce, liquidity is extremely scarce.
Right. Yeah.
But saying, hey, I want a camera the next time a camera is available, and I'm going to give somebody my bicycle in exchange. You can imagine that you get into a position where people express their wants and express what they're rid of, and you get this very low level kind of subsistence clearing function for those goods.
Right.
It's not just a rich person's game.
I agree. And in those villages, if there's a phone, even just a single phone, so you can do one of these trades, village can come together with items that aren't being used in the village. They can be rearranged and everyone goes home better off, right? So it's a situation where just bringing this capability into a village makes the village wealthier without having to inject currency into the village. So I think,
before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about real estate,
Mm.
right? Real estate, supply chains, you know, high-tech manufacturing, jet engine spares, all that kind of stuff, right? The world is clearly economically in the process of going off a cliff, the likes of which hasn't seen in living memory.
Right.
We all kind of have a sense of that. You need money to be able to conduct trade unless you've got efficient mechanisms for barter.
Mm.
And if you've got efficient mechanisms for barter, it reduces your cost of doing trade because you don't have to borrow money to pay somebody for the stuff that you want, as a way of bridging the finance of waiting for the stuff that you don't want to get taken off your hands so you can get the stuff you do want, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, rather than using money to span time, you know, I need to give somebody $3 million to buy the thing, you know, and then I'm going to do that to do all of that stuff just clears as a series of swaps.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a bit about the global macro implications of having this kind of, you know, efficient multi-party barter in an environment where liquidity is going to be at massive premium.
Right, right. Yeah, a couple of things I'd say. First off, we're searching for really the right name, because while it does look like barter, since we have currency involved, this is, I really think of it as the evolution of currency, that we're going beyond now currency, because currency is this indirect solution to the problem of mismatched wants. Now we have a direct solution. And I think there is a situation where we're looking for the right, sometimes people call it neo barter, but I think haven't quite nailed it on the name. But yes, these direct value to value trades, what they'll do is they'll allow goods, you have all these kind of goods in this that are in the supply chain network that have a certain amount of value wherever they are. They'll have more value elsewhere. You'll have kind of AI discovering these trades. You'll have things moving around, and you'll need very little currency. And as a result, you'll have a relatively inflation resistant supply chain, because things will be moving directly. There's two benefits. One, it'll be inflation resistant because you'll have direct movement. And the second is things don't have to go to a central location. That right now you have so much inefficiency, not just financially because you have to sell things in a centralized market, but physically. Oftentimes goods go to these redistribution hubs, right, where they have to get sent back out. But if you know where things need to go and they can go directly, then you have this not just decentralized, but fully distributed commerce. So the big vision of this, especially when you start to get self-driving cars and self-driving boats, and you've got all sorts of, you know, automated forms of transport around, the idea would be things can go from where they're not needed to wherever they are needed. Much more efficient commerce, much more efficient supply chain that is inflation resistant as well.
Yeah. So I mean, that is a sort of fundamental engine of transformation. You know, if we could figure out how to get the ecological footprint stuff priced in properly, that begins to look like the outline of, you know, a kind of next version of the global economy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because once you can price in carbon and other kind of environmental externalities, and once you can do things like exclude goods which have inappropriate labor conditions in their manufacturing and so on, you know, you sort of begin to say, okay, well, it's much more capital efficient. It doesn't involve paying vast amount of interest to the banks. It allows people to have stuff but not money to effectively get other stuff that they want. It takes out so much of the friction and so many of the middlemen in the economy. I sort of look at that and it's like, it's the first decent looking proposal I've seen for how cryptocurrency, you know, fundamentally outperforms the older systems. Because, you know, I used to say to people, look, you know, a blockchain, you know, when we say cryptocurrency, it's horseless carriage, right? You know, horseless carriage, cryptocurrency, it's the same attempt to look at the new thing and give the new thing a name based on its similarities to the old thing, even though the new thing is vast and the old thing is kind of small. And that notion that you have this kind of high order mathematical matching as a core function for all physical assets which are represented in a digital form. You kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it becomes a default in the same way that any text which is stored in a digital file is searchable. Any asset that has a digital twin immediately becomes exchangeable in a smart barter and machinery.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's fully liquid economy.
Fully liquid economy, and that I mean that is so many of the world's problems comes from not having that. It kind of sounds like it does for physical matter what Google did for search. So
right.
one of the biggest things I've ever seen. So I think, yeah, I mean, more power to you, and we will start trying to get you physical assets to trade as fast as possible. I think you've got several of the companies represented here tonight, very enthusiastic about doing this thing. So yeah, let's do it.
And I'm sure there will be many questions for John and for all of our other panelists when we move across to the breakout session. John, thank you very much. Thanks to all of our panelists. So a couple of things. This part of our meetup is now concluding.